Hello and welcome to another edition of Health Solutions with Shawn and Janet Needham, where Team Needham discusses everything healthcare. This is our midweek podcast on Thursday morning. As always, we try to have our podcast between 8 and 9, and today it's at 7, our midweek podcast. We stream live on Facebook. I have 3 different Facebook pages. My personal Facebook page, so Shawn Needham's personal Facebook page, and the Moses Lake Professional Pharmacy Facebook page, and the Sickened Facebook page. My Sickened Facebook page is my book Facebook page. It's called Sickened, How the Government Ruined Healthcare and How to Fix It. And one of the things that makes my book different is it actually has a 6-step fix in how to fix our healthcare system. As many of you know, especially the ones that have followed me, our healthcare system is broken. It's a sick care system. It's not a healthcare system. It doesn't help to make anybody healthy. It doesn't try to keep anybody healthy. It preys on sick people. And today we're going to be talking about that. And we have Jason Gootman, who is a certified health coach. And he's going to be talking about how we can lose weight, which in America, obesity is the true pandemic. It's epidemic in this country, getting worse and worse every day. And with that, we have diabetes. And type 2 diabetes is definitely an epidemic, pandemic. Even in children now, type 2 diabetes is a problem. So without further ado, I'm going to welcome Jason to our show. Jason, welcome to our show.
Shawn, great to be here and great to meet you in person. In person 2023 version.
Exactly. So I'm going to go ahead and let you introduce yourself and tell you a little bit about what you do.
Awesome. I'm a Mayo Clinic certified wellness coach, a national board certified wellness coach, and I'm a certified nutritionist and a certified exercise physiologist. And a straightforward, I think, most interesting way to think about what I do is I help people go from knowing what to do and having good intentions to truly forming the lasting habits that are going to help them live with the kind of well-being they want to live with.
You talk, Jason, about one of the things that we talk about a lot, me being in healthcare and a pharmacist, is about type 2 diabetes. And there are a lot of people on medications to treat type 2 diabetes. I, as a pharmacist, my wife is a pharmacist, we absolutely do not believe in medications to treat type 2 diabetes. But there are some people in healthcare out there that I debate with that says diabetes is not reversible. Let's go.
Well, yeah. So what's super interesting about that you go right there is, I can't speak as a physician or a medical professional, but I can speak with what I see on a week-to-week and day-to-day basis. And I would say from a wellness coaching perspective and a lifestyle medicine perspective, type 2 diabetes is the poster child ailment for reversibility and prevention through lifestyle. It's the most, all of the other common lifestyle ailments respond very well to lifestyle improvements, but type 2 diabetes, in my experience, responds the most thoroughly and the most quickly.
Yeah, I agree with you. It is the one that is the most linked to lifestyle. And if you change your habits, it's the one that's probably reversed the easiest, the quickest. One thing one challenge that I have ongoing, and I always tell people if they're on medications that will, cause hypoglycemia, don't do this. But if you think diabetes isn't reversible, I just dare you to fast for 24 to 48 hours and tell me that your blood sugar doesn't go down. And I mean, that's just a rational question. And the answer is, and anybody that knows anything will say, well, of course your blood sugar will go down. Bingo, right?
Well, I think that's what makes type 2 diabetes interesting from a lifestyle medicine perspective and wellness coaching perspective, is because it's so responsive physiologically. It's an incredible bridge to the sense of empowerment that one ultimately gets when they make lifestyle improvements. What I mean by that is a person has this strong epiphany relatively quickly. Obviously they don't get all the way they want to go overnight, but relatively quickly they get to see and even say to themselves, maybe even out loud say to themselves, I did that. The way I lived today, whether it was fasting, whether it was some other form of improving eating habits, whether it was getting some more sleep. I even see people seeing their blood sugar responding to reducing their stress levels, which is amazing because that's so much, it's easy for that to be less tangible and seemingly less potent. But when people can see that the way they live impacts their blood sugar levels almost immediately, they start to enter a different game of being less feeling dependent on medication, less dependent on anything outside of them in general, the medical system in general. And this is going to be a weird paradox or ironic term. It's a gateway drug into, wow, I have a lot of ability to control the outcomes of my well-being and even more broadly my life. So I know that was a little bit of a rant, but I think it's very cool for people to see quickly that what they do can influence their blood sugar levels.
Yeah, so tell us, some of the debates I get into also is that, well, some people have type 2 diabetes and they don't need to lose weight. So I don't necessarily, they think, well, that's not reversible then. Can you hit on that? I don't want to put you on the spot, but I bet you have an answer for it.
Yeah, I don't think I have the most thorough answer on this. I'll start by saying that I think sometimes there's a chicken and egg question going on here, and I don't think it's completely well understood. There might be some people on Earth that claim to have this completely well understood. I think the cases can be made, and this is on the edges of my expertise, but I think the case could be made that obesity or excess body fat drives dysfunctional blood sugar dynamics and drives type 2 diabetes. I think the case can also be made that dysfunctional blood sugar dynamics drives type 2 diabetes and that drives obesity. And I think there's both of those cases can be made. So I think the way I look at this, Shawn, is, and maybe this is an advantage of coming from this outside of medical training, is I'm less predisposed to looking at things from the diagnosis perspective. And what I simply see is a human, every one of us, has a set of needs in an ongoing sense throughout the course of our lives. And when we meet most of those needs most of the time, we're well. And when we fail to meet a certain portion of those needs, a certain portion of the time, we become sick. And that sickness manifests in different ways in different people. And I think some people, they can have type 2 diabetes while being relatively lean. Some people can be have significant excess body fat and not have type 2 diabetes. I think in both cases, the excess body fat or the type 2 diabetes are indicating that the person is out of harmony with nature, isn't meeting enough of their needs enough of the time. And it almost doesn't matter to me, because the solution in any of those cases is to help that person meet more of their needs, more of their time. And by needs, I mean things like nutritious food, moving our bodies, sleep and rest, relatively low stress, or stated conversely, relatively high fulfillment in work and relationships. Does that get to some of your question?
Oh, of course, absolutely. And I can tell you on the stress thing, if anybody has, ever done a continuous blood glucose monitor, which I have,
Mm-hmm.
Right when you wake up in the morning, your glucose goes up. I mean, cortisol prepares you for the day, the stressors of the day, whether it be mental, whether it be physical.
Yes.
And when I would get to work, I mean, my glucose would go up even a little bit higher, about 10 points higher.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. And the highest my glucose ever was speaking of stress, and this is like ultimate stress, not ultimate stress because there's things that are worse, but I wanted to really test my glucose, what it was doing when I was riding my bike.
Okay.
And I was mountain bike riding, and the highest my glucose ever went was 170, and it's when I crashed.
Oh my goodness, yeah. Wow.
Yeah. And other than that, my glucose, now when I was riding actively, depending on how much I was riding or how hard I was riding, the intensity, my glucose averaged 140 during my rides. Now, that's a stressor. Exercise is a stressor. So, people have to realize that about their glucose, that exercise initially, at least my experience, and I would love your comments, at least initially, exercise can raise your glucose. But then right after I would be done riding, my glucose would go, it would drop like a rock. So
yeah, I think it is important. I mean, it's not something that's talked about a lot because, and it's mostly well-intentioned because most of us in these realms want to be promoting exercise as something that's very good for most people in most situations, and it is. But it is helpful to think of it as a stressor and so as how it affects blood sugar dynamics. Another realm that it's a stressor, and this is something I've experienced in my life, is when exercise becomes excessive. It becomes a stressor. It's one of those things that the way the research, or the way the scientific evidence shows on exercise is a U-shaped curve, so that being sedentary is obviously not good for us. But at the people doing what we might call excessive exercise actually have similar wellness outcomes, including mortality, as people who are sedentary. So it is something to be careful with for sure.
Absolutely, and I think the most important part, well, this whole equation is recovery and rest and sleep.
Because it's kind of neat, Shawn, that we got here, because I think when you mentioned in your introduction something like obesity being the real epidemic, I agree with that statement, and I would add to it that sort of deep to the obesity epidemic and all the other lifestyle ailment epidemics is straightforwardly a lifestyle epidemic, right? I mean, what we're looking at is if we were able to step outside of our society and like we were looking in on it and studying it, we would see not just a society that eats a lot of junk food, not just a society that is very sedentary, but a society that doesn't get enough sleep, doesn't get enough rest. It's sort of normalized, the rat race, I suppose is a way of saying it. And your mountain bike crash is more like, from our hunter-gatherer days, is more like, running away from a predator. It's an acute stressor, but I think something that's really, really damaging to many people in our society is there's a low level drip of above average stress, discontent, lack of fulfillment as sort of a baseline, sort of an all the time thing. And, those are the things that I get to help people with. Those are the things that you get to help people with. And I think what's equally powerful about lifestyle medicine is the ability to reverse ailments and prevent ailments. But then there's a whole nother realm, which is like, we can normalize the idea that most people can feel awesome most of the time. Doesn't mean you don't have bad days, doesn't mean you don't have bad periods of life. Life can be very hard. But we've unfortunately in our society normalized, that's sort of like, what all the things people say, Shawn, like, oh, I'm getting old, or, oh, it's genetic, and there's sort of this assumption that chronic sickness is a part of most people's lives for extended periods of time. And the opportunity is to reverse that thinking and think that we can thrive most of the time, and we can have systems in place for dealing with periodic illness when it unfortunately strikes.
Absolutely. So tell us about your program. How do you help people?
Wellness coaching is really cool, and as you know, it's an emerging field, and the key thing for people to know is that in addition to being able to help people with the things that you would think a wellness coach would, nutrition, exercise, stress reduction, holistic wellness, the core of our training is in the psychology of lasting behavior improvement and positive habit formation. So we're really working with people on the level of implementation, not simply information providing, advice giving, telling people what to do. We're working with a person on the level of their values, their interests, their strengths, and building out practices that are realistic for them, sustainable for them in their life. Which is a way of saying, just solving the problem that a physician sends someone home and says, eat better, exercise more, take better care of yourself in general, come back in 6 months and we'll test you again. And then, 99% of those people come back having trouble making those changes because change is hard, right? There's a reason that's a saying. Wellness coaches, I don't think it's a fair claim to say we make change easy, because we don't. But we make change go from seeming like impossible to feeling doable, and helping a person get some real traction with it and make some real progress. Because here's the thing about lifestyle medicine: it's only potent if people do it. It's incredible if you look at a scientific study of someone who lived in a more of a laboratory setting for a period of time. The physiological changes can be profound, but people aren't living in laboratory settings. People are living in the real world. So in the big picture, what I do is help people in the real world, in their real life, go from the current set of self-care habits they have to a set of self-care habits that are going to help them achieve their wellness goals.
Yeah. Now, so tell us how that program starts. I mean, how does somebody start with you? What's the step-by-step process?
Yeah, a good way to frame this first is that I typically work with someone in a 6-month arrangement, and that is very deliberate. 6 months is enough time to build lasting habits, but it also has an end date. It has a graduation, and that is very, very, very important, because the way I approach working with people is that I'm not doing them a service if I'm fishing for them. My job is to teach them how to fish, because then they have a skill set they can use for the rest of their life without me needing to be there helping them along the way. And then we typically have, I call them wellness sessions. They're hour-long meetings every other week. Twice a month is a better way to say it. And they're in person or online. And we talk about the kinds of things we're talking about, what the person's vision is for their wellness, what their specific measurable goals are for their wellness. And then we break it down into a tangible action plan for that 2 or 3 week period between sessions. And that includes a meal plan, a workout plan, and an other self-care plan. And we're viewing that 2 week period with something I learned at the Mayo Clinic called an experimental mindset. So this is very different from what people are used to with like going on a diet or starting a highly structured workout program, where the mindset is usually around like, my job is to pass this thing, or the mindset is actually usually, my job is not to fail this thing. And what we're looking at is, after they come back after 2 or 3 weeks, is like we're scientists. What worked well? What didn't work well? What can we add? What can we take away? What can we tweak? And then they go out with essentially their wellness plan, their action plan 2.0, and live it in the wild again with my support, with the ability to contact me for if they're struggling, if they have questions, if they want to share their successes. And each time we get back together, we're repeating this process. And the idea is that the person is forming habits such that by the time we get 4 or 5 months in, they're starting to say, this is kind of part of my life. It doesn't feel effortless, but it feels doable. I'm not white knuckling a program. I'm becoming the kind of person who takes good care of myself. So I created that very deliberately, the 6-month container, the twice a month sessions, the support between sessions. all serve a good analogy for this is like training wheels on a kid's bike. They ultimately need to learn to ride the bike because that's what's going to keep their blood sugar levels, their blood pressure, their blood cholesterol levels, their body composition in a good place for years and decades to come. And that's what's going to help them experience the well-being they want to experience. And I'm there to help them go from I'm there to help them through the very hard part, going from what might be, depending on their age, 30, 40, 50, 60 years of adult, of habits, and making some new ones that are going to serve them better.
So tell us about a success story that you've had.
Yeah, I'm the first gentleman that comes to mind when you ask that question is let's say a local gentleman to me, mid 50s, about maybe early 50s to mid 50s when we started our work together. His major prompt was blood sugar levels. He also had high blood pressure. He also had weight to lose. But the major thing that got him to say, I want to do something about this is he was actually quite dissatisfied with the side effects he was experiencing from blood sugar medication. And he was sort of being encouraged to just live with those and deal with them. And he's a stubborn enough guy that he said, even though he did not have a history of being physically active, did not have a history of working on positive eating habits, so, had enough sort of determination and empowerment from other areas of his life to say, I think I can do this, and I want to get some help. Interesting side, little bit of side information on this gentleman. I remember when I first met him and when he became intrigued at working with me, one thing that intrigued him was when I talked about what I do, I said that often some of the deeper work I'm doing with people is helping them overcome the common challenges of yo-yo dieting and emotional eating. Those are good examples of realms where more information isn't going to help someone because they've been given enough information. They've been on enough plans. They've willpowered themselves like crazy to try to overcome emotional eating and had very little success. So we got to work. One thing that I think you'll find interesting and listeners will find interesting about this gentleman's story is big changes in terms of outcomes. So he lost. I ended up working with him about a year. He lost 35 to 40 pounds. He went from diabetic blood sugar levels to normal blood sugar levels. That took about for him. That took about 8 months, and then he stabilized it. But what I think the thing that I think is fairly interesting is he went, let's call his baseline typical not very healthy lifestyle in the United States to exercising, if I'm remembering correctly, 45 minutes 4 times a week. And this is the way I would simply characterize his nutrition improvements. When he started, he was eating 75% junk food, which I consider basically all forms of processed food. And by the time we were done, he was probably eating 75 to 85% real food. So he didn't do anything in the categories of what people might consider more extreme in terms of nutrition protocols or exercise protocols. And that was enough to get some very, very good results for him.
Well, we shouldn't really be that surprised. I mean, those are small, 45 minutes of exercise. And I'm assuming he probably didn't start out doing super, super intense exercise if he was sedentary to begin with.
Right.
And changing your diet from 75% junk food to 70%, whole foods, even though it sounds like a small change when you think about it, it's a huge change from doing nothing to something. And if you think about what we did, 50 years ago, before diabetes was an epidemic,
right.
Before obesity was an epidemic, Well, 50 years ago, people didn't even go to the gym. We didn't really schedule, 50 or 60, 70 years ago, we didn't schedule exercise. We just didn't.
Right.
I mean, typically, because we had more physical jobs. So we were out walking, we were out moving.
Yes.
And then our foods were probably back then, if you go back 70 years, our foods are pretty much 100% whole foods, not a lot of packaged stuff at all,
right.
Especially if you go back to pre-World War II.
Right.
So it's not magic. And I like what you said about, he didn't need any more knowledge. He didn't need any more information. I mean, I know so many people that have struggled with their weight their entire adult lives. I'm one of them. And they know what they need to do. They've done keto. They've done vegetarian. They've done, Atkins. They've done it all. They know more about dieting than I do. But that's not the problem. It's a mindset up here is the problem. So
Shawn, I really like that you reflected that, because and that's part of the point I was trying to make, is that unfortunately it's part of our go big or go home culture. People think that to reverse their diabetes, to reverse their high blood pressure, they need to do the kind of they need to do keto, they need to do vegan, they need to do CrossFit, they need to do a marathon.
Right.
Some of those things are great to do at different points in our lives. But I think you make a great point that for most of the time that these lifestyle ailments didn't exist, what most people were doing was moving as part of their work and or daily life, and mostly eating real food, and occasionally having dessert or some sweet treats here or there. But it was sort of the baseline culture was to live that way, and the results were these ailments didn't really exist.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah. So if you had to tell somebody, I know everybody's different. And that's what I like about a coach like yourself, is that you individualize every program. But if there's one thing that they could do to be healthy, what would you say that is? I know I'm putting you on the spot. What would you say that is?
I'll cheat and make it a 3-part, a 1A, B, and C, and it would be. I have kind of catchy sayings I use to keep this simple and mantra-like for people. I would say, just eat real food and really enjoy it. I would say, I don't think I have as catchy of a saying, but move your body in ways you enjoy. And then in the third one, it would be, be cognizant of the holistic nature of wellness. And this is sort of like old-fashioned common sense, like get some sleep and rest, and tend to, do some, don't do drudgery work, do some work that you find some meaning and fulfillment in, and care for one another, take care of your relationships. That's my, as close to my one thing as I think I could get on the spot.
Well, I like the fact that you talk about relationships and you talk about a fulfilling job. On our podcast, we talk about health and wellness a lot, and we talk to our patients in our pharmacy a lot about health and wellness. And I basically say that there's 3 things we can do to stay healthy, and that's eat, that's exercise, and that's sleep. And in general, that's true. And of all those, people don't realize that the most important is sleep. We will die without sleep before we'll die without food.
Sure.
And as you and I were already discussing, 70 years ago, nobody really scheduled exercise and they lived healthy lives. So we don't have to exercise to stay alive. We don't. Now, I'm not saying that you said movement, and I love the term movement better. And my wife and I had a podcast right before Christmas, right before the first of the year, about, exercise is a 4-letter word. For a lot of people, it's just, move, do something, but also to be healthy. That's what I like about your program, mentally and overall physically. We need to lower stress, so have a good, fulfilling job and relationships in our lives. Because you can do all those 3 other things I talked about being important, but if those things aren't also a priority in your life, you will not be a happy person or a healthy person.
Well, what's neat about those other areas, and listeners can look at this kind of information up if they're interested. A good shortcut is Robert Waldinger's TED Talk. Robert Waldinger was or might still be the gentleman who runs a study at Harvard called, I think it's called the Harvard Study of Adult Development. And they've studied people for, if not more than 100 years, close to 100 years. And the major takeaway, they're sort of looking at what are all the factors in life that create well-being. And of all the factors we would consider, the quality of our relationships as an outcome of that study is the most important one. There are also more clinical studies. I'll share one briefly, share the idea behind one briefly. They bring married couples into a hospital and they give each person a friction burn wound on their forearm. Then they put them in a room to do a problem-solving challenge together, and they're being observed through one-way glass. They don't know they're being observed. And they're getting ratings from the psychologists or other social scientists on how supportively they talk to each other or how contentiously they talk with each other. And they get a subjective rating of the quality of the relationship. And then for something like 6 weeks, they observe how well their friction burn wounds heal and also take blood for measured markers of inflammation and things like that. And you can see where it's going. The couples rated stronger, healthier, recovered, they healed faster. So I think it's fun to point out that those areas that could be sort of a softer have demonstrated sort of like physiological connection to our well-being.
And there again, we really shouldn't be surprised. I mean,
there are people from 100 years ago, people who have stronger, healthier, happier marriages live longer and have less sickness. You needed to do a study to prove that. That's kind of fun, right?
I mean, let's face it, Jason. I know there's some people out there that might think different, but we are created to interact with each other. We're created to have relationships with each other. We're not created to be alone. Right. So we really shouldn't be surprised that we're healthier when we have a healthy relationship with other people.
Right. I think, one profound takeaway from any of these conversations about lifestyle medicine is that it is simple. I think keeping it simple is very important. And I'm big on this. I think I made a post 3-6 months ago, and I wrote it like it was a letter. I said, "Dear lifestyle medicine movement," and then wrote a few paragraphs. And the idea was this whole idea that it's not about more information. It's more about creating cultures where this is valued. People have support. People have help with learning the skills around these kind of things. And it's sort of a return to some simpler ways of life that are kind of common sense. And one beautiful thing about it, Shawn, is, and I touched on this a little bit earlier, is this is not just a do this now to prevent problems later game. I saw a great infographic about exercise the other day, and what was particularly great about it is it had 2 columns, and the left-hand column was things that get better right away when you exercise, and the right-hand column was things that will get better and stay better for decades when you exercise, when you consistently exercise. I think that's an important message for people, that this isn't taking care of yourself isn't this like drudgery thing you have to do for a future benefit. You generally speaking start feeling better right away and feel that improvement in ways that are personally meaningful to you. You have more energy to bring to your work. You have more energy to bring to your family. You're more focused, more clarity, more creativity. When you get the whole system operating better, yes, you get some fantastic long-term benefits, but you also sometimes I talk about it this way, Shawn, when I see people make a transformation and they weren't, like in the hospital sick, right? Like someone comes to me and they've been recently diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, or they have pre-diabetes. They're not, they're still living their life, right? But what it turns out when they improve their well-being is they realize they were living life in sort of like black and white with sound down. Now they're living with like surround sound in Technicolor.
There you go.
It's a really cool way to think about this. It's not just about, I don't want to get type 2 diabetes, I don't want to get dementia, I don't want to get cancer. It's like turning that person up. It's like them living at their fullest. And I think that's a really cool way to think about this stuff.
Well, as a pharmacist, I say routinely that the best antidepressant ever invented is exercise. And I feel it myself. Sometimes I'm not feeling the greatest, and it's like, you know what? And then I'll go out and I'll crush an hour bike ride, and I'm just like, I'm ready. I'm on fire. Yes. And I think about how many people in our healthcare system are on antidepressants, and all they need to do is just start moving. Just start creating some of their own dopamine, some of their own endorphins, and they won't need antidepressants. I mean, and the great thing about exercise is it just happens to have some benefits of increased muscle, increased lean body mass, decreased body fat. The list, like you said, the long-term list goes on and on and on. That's the side effect from exercise.
You'll super appreciate this as a pharmacist. I make this distinction. So side effects is obviously the term used in medicine and pharmacy. I like to think of the common side effects of common medications. You know them better than I do, but constipation, diarrhea, muscle pain, sleepiness, these kind of things, right? I say effects isn't the accurate term, because effects is too sort of neutral or benign. So I think of those as side problems, because most of us don't want to go through the day with constipation or diarrhea, right? And then what I say is that lifestyle medicine or lifestyle improvements come with side benefits. So when you use lifestyle medicine to, say, lower your blood pressure, improve your blood sugar levels, improve your blood cholesterol levels, you get that under control, and you get the kind of things you're talking about. You sleep better moods, better digestion, some of the things I mentioned earlier: better focus, better mental clarity, better productivity. Right? You can even make more money when you're healthier. Right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
So I like that distinction appeals to some people. They say, even if I could get away with not having any side problems with medication, there's an opportunity cost by not exploring the lifestyle medicine approach, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. So speaking of somebody that really changed her lifestyle, we have a loyal listener. She's been on our podcast, and she's going to be on our podcast soon again, Laura Vest Turner. And she really changed her life a few years ago. And speaking of relationships, she changed her whole family's life. Her husband and her were both overweight, and she keto has worked very well for her. She cooked some great keto recipes. I think she lost, and Laura, you'll have to help me out with this. I think she lost 100 pounds or close to. Amazing, life-changing story for her and her family. But she puts on here, health's a complete package: food, faith, fitness, sleep. She just messaged, and she corrected me. 130 pounds. You go, Laura. She probably tuned in a little bit late because she says she doesn't like to exercise. Don't care for the gym, but I'm happy to walk my dog, and I guess you don't have to go to the gym to stay fit. Well, Laura, that's exactly what we were saying earlier in the podcast. So if you go back and watch from the beginning, it's just about movement, getting up, being sedentary. 70 years ago, people didn't really exercise. They just moved. They didn't really schedule exercise. So keep walking your dog, Laura. You're crushing it. And I'm excited to have you back on our podcast in a few months. So, Jason, this has been very helpful. One of the things, the goal of our podcast is to educate and empower individuals to take charge of their own health. Mm-hmm. And I like that's what you're doing. Is like, we said early on that most people, they already have enough information. They just need to be empowered to see the benefits that they can have when they make some lifestyle changes. And I think that's what your program does. So thank you for doing that. I think you've achieved our goal today of educating and empowering individuals. So Jason, as we wrap this up, I'm going to ask you what you have a passion for.
Well, I think it's a big question, but I think I can answer it straightforwardly. And then this took me some years to get to, and some practicing philosophy on what's important to me in life, and I'll answer it in a word that could be a shallow word, and because it's a word that's used a lot. But in the way we're talking about it, life to me is about wellness. We have the opportunity. Life is very simple. We have the opportunity to suffer. The suffering is part of life. But we also have the opportunity individually, in our families, in our communities, to ensure as much well-being as possible for as many of us as possible, for as much a portion of our life as possible. And in that idea of living life in surround sound and Technicolor, I just can't think of something better to do with our lives. Why? That's the clear opportunity, is alleviate as much suffering and live as robustly as possible.
And maybe we could add to that 4K or 8K too.
Okay. I acknowledge that my analogy is you can tell I'm the kind of person that doesn't have a television. I'm not a gadget techie person.
So Jason, as we wrap this podcast up, I think I found you. I don't know where I found you. You're on a lot of social media. Here's your LinkedIn. What is the best way that somebody can get a hold of you if they want to reach out and ask some questions?
Best way right now is directly through LinkedIn. I'm making a super duper new website that's about 2 months out from release. But right now, LinkedIn is the place. And when you want to find my new website, I'll obviously have it be linked to it on LinkedIn.
Awesome. So I so appreciate you being on today. We can reverse our nation's health. I mean, we really can. And I think over the last 3 years, if there's anything that really has popped out, it's like the healthier you are already, the more that you can thrive in any situation.
That's right.
So, and there's no reason. You don't blame it on age. Don't blame it on getting older. I was talking to a friend the other day, Jack LaLanne. Are you familiar with Jack LaLanne?
Yes.
Yeah, of course you are. I mean, of course you are. That's a rhetorical question. I knew you would. But, he was a guy, and I don't know how old he lived to be. I think he was in his 90s, close to 100. I don't really know. But he had a radio show. He was kind of the first guy that promoted health back in the 50s. It was black. Speaking of Technicolor, it was black and white back then. He was on black and white TV. So that's how long ago it was. And, he promoted eating healthy and exercising. And, he was healthy up into and doing his radio show up into his 90s. And then one day he just died. But he was still thriving in life. So we can all do that. We can all be Jack LaLanne.
That can be the normal for sure. Absolutely.
Yeah. So Jason, thank you for being on. I really appreciate it. Listeners and viewers, thank you for tuning in today. Health Solutions with Shawn and Janet Needham. Monday, we have Jennifer Bridges on our show. You don't want to miss out. Jennifer Bridges, Health Solutions, 12:30 to 1:30 Pacific Standard Time, as usual on Monday. Listeners and viewers, thank you for tuning in. Health Solutions with Shawn and Janet Needham. Thank you.